Hello everyone, in this episode I'm going to talk about how you can migrate your Blazor WebAssembly application from .NET Core 3.1 to .NET 5 framework. First thing first, we're going to need to install .NET 5 on our machine. I'm going to be using Windows for this demo, but if you're using Mac or Linux, .NET 5 is available for Mac and Linux. You can Google download .NET 5 and you should be able to install it for your operating systems too. Blazor made a lot of improvements in .NET 5 like CSS isolation, auto refresh, better debugging support, virtualization, Azure, static web apps integration. So there are a lot of improvements. We're now going to talk about these improvements. We're going to concentrate on migrating our application from 3.1 to 5. And for that, I'm going to be following this article, which is posted on docs.microsoft.com. I feel like that is a pretty solid article to follow to migrate your application from 3.1 to 5. So let's go ahead and follow that article. But before I go to that article, I just wanted to show you my project. I've been working on this project for some time now. It's called as Blazing Chat application. And I've been using, if I open my proj file here, I've been using 3.1. I'm targeting .NET Standard 2.1 to run my application. And it's pretty simple application. There is authentication, custom authentication integrated in this application. Also, I have integrated external authentications too. So currently it's working on .NET Core 3.1. We need to migrate it to .NET 5. So first thing, you're going to need to install .NET 5. You can download .NET 5 from this link. I'll share this link in the video description. Like I said, .NET 5 is available for Linux and Mac. I have installed it for Windows. I've installed 64-bit version of it. If I go to my terminal and I say .NET version here, then you can see that this is the latest version which has been installed on my machine. Now let's follow this article. This article will, there are some steps that we need to follow. The first step is the prerequisites. You need an editor to make these changes. We have been using Visual Studio Code, so I'm going to select Visual Studio Code for this article. They're asking us to install .NET 5 or later version to migrate from 3.1 to 5. If you are using global.json, then please change your SDK version to 5. I don't use global.json on my machine, but if you're using for your projects, then please go ahead and change that. Otherwise, it won't point it to .NET 5. Then they're asking us to update the target framework for some of the other projects that you have included in your Blazor WebAssembly or server application. We'll do this as we make progress into this article, but we'll have to do this for our shared project. They're also talking about some of the routing logic that they have changed. Blazor routing used to work differently than how ASP.NET Core applications work, like MVC or Razor applications. So they wanted to all the routing work same. They did not want routing to be different for different UI frameworks. So they made those changes for Blazor too. And now, the higher precedence logic has changed how the URL matches with the routing logic and how it gets mapped to your application has been changed. So if you are using some specific routing logic for Blazor, you might have to make some changes. I'm not using it for my application, but you might have to do that. If you're using some different routing logic, then they're asking us to change this to prefer exact match to true, so that your URL that you're putting in your browser matches with matches exactly with the routing logic of Blazor. But if you want the backward compatibility, then you can set it to false. But I highly recommend that change that to true and make it work similarly to other ASP.NET Core applications, so that you don't run into issues when you migrate to .NET 6. Let's get started with updating our application. The first thing that we need to do is to add this line in our index.html file, we're going to need to add this line because, because of CSS isolation. Blazor added CSS isolation so that you can keep CSS separate for each of your Razor components. So whenever you compile your application, all the CSS gets compiled into one CSS file, and this is what that file looks like. So we'll need to add this link in our index.html file. And if you're using Blazor server, you'll have to add it here. If you're using standalone Blazor WebAssembly application, you'll have to add it in your index.html file. So first, I'm gonna copy this and go to my client project. And here I'm gonna find my index.html file in my root folder. And then in my head tag, I'm gonna add this link. And I'll have to change this to Blazing Chat because that's the name of my project. And this is where the CSS will get compiled. And this is what we'll use for our application. The next thing is they're asking us to add a namespace in our imports.razor file. This namespace will help us use virtualize component. Virtualize component help us to load bigger data on a Razor component. So you don't want all of your data to get loaded on your component. You want virtualization applied on this component, and that's the reason why they want us to add this namespace in imports.razor if in future if you want to use virtualize as one of your components. So I'm going to copy that and go to my imports.razor here and then add this line virtualize so that I could use this for some of the components in the future. Next thing, we need to go to our main layout, and here we'll have to wrap our HTML with this div tag because they're using this page CSS class in main layout.razor.css. So we'll have to wrap our main layout with this page class. So I'm gonna go to my shared folder, open my main layout, and I have this HTML written for my main layout. So I'm gonna add this page div tag here and then copy this, actually cut this and put it in this div tag. And let's add a tab to this so that it looks nicer. Okay, so this is how you can wrap your main layout HTML with this div tag. Now we'll have to add this main.razor.css file so that the CSS gets applied to this main layout from this CSS file. Like I mentioned, now Blazor supports CSS isolation, so we can use this. I tried not applying these changes to my application and it started looking weird, so I recommend that you should also use this CSS file. I understand that some of the people must have changed the CSS depending on how they want to make their application look different from how application looks which comes out of the box, but you'll have to make some tweaks to make it look right for your application. So I'm going to copy this and create a file wherever that main layout.razor file is. I'm going to create a new file here and put that file there, and then copy this CSS and paste it in that new file. And now same thing we'll have to do for navmenu.razor.css. So I'm going to copy this, and navmenu.razor is here. I'm going to create a new file in the same folder and then go back to the article, copy the CSS for navmenu and paste it here. And there are some changes in app.css too. So I'm going to copy this app.css file, and app.css is in root folder. So I'm going to go to CSS and open this app.css, select all of this text, delete that, and paste new text which was given on the article. Now, once we are done with that, now the actual update begins. We are done with CSS changes. We are going to now make our application pointed to .NET 5, which is installed on our machine. First change that we need to make is to change Microsoft.NET SDK Web to Microsoft.NET SDK Blazor WebAssembly. For that, I'll have to go to my CS proj file here and then change this project SDK to pointed to Blazor WebAssembly. And then they're asking us to remove target framework .NET Standard 2.1 and Razor language version 3. And instead of that, they're asking us to change the target framework to .NET 5. So we're going to remove this Razor lang property here and then change this to .NET 5.0. And if I go back to the article, they're also asking us to remove one of the packages, which is Microsoft ASP.NET Core components.blazor webassembly.build. So we have been using this package. We don't need that anymore. So I'm going to remove that. And then they're asking us to they're also asking us to update the packages to latest version, and we'll do that at the end of the video because, we have been using hosted version of Blazor, so we need to do that for the server and the shared project too. So we'll do that at the end. So the next thing that they're asking us to do is to change the app element to a div tag and set the ID to app instead of using app element. I'm going to copy this and then go to my index.html file. So instead of using app element, now we're going to use a div tag whose ID is going to be app. Once we are done with that, then we need to go to our program.cs file and we'll have to change this root component pointing to app element to hash app so that it knows that it needs to pick up this div tag as the root component, not app element. So we need to add this hash in it. So let's go to our program.cs and then I'm going to change this to hash app. And another thing they're asking us to change is to HTTP client that we added as a service in our application. We need to change its lifetime from transient to scoped. So I'm going to copy this and change HTTP client's lifetime to scope. And then if you're using standalone Blazor WebAssembly with Microsoft accounts, then you need to make all these changes. I'm not using that in my application, so I don't really need to do that. But if you're using Microsoft accounts like Azure Active Directory, then you'll have to make these changes in your application. Like I said, I'm not doing it, but if you're using it, then you'll have to do it. With that, I'm done with most of the changes. Now we need to update all our NuGet packages. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to close all these files and then go to my CS proj file. And here, if I'm using Microsoft or system.NET packages, then I can change them to .NET 5 version. But if you're using any custom packages from NuGet, then I recommend that you first check if they do have .NET 5 or 5 version for that NuGet package. Otherwise, don't change that. That will throw errors for your application. So I'm going to change this to 5.0.0. And I'm gonna change other packages too here. And also restore my application so that it pulls up new NuGet packages. And we'll also have to go to our server project and then tell our server project to point to .NET 5. So I'm going to open my server project file here and ask it to point it to .NET 5.0. And we'll also update our NuGet packages for the server too. I think it's a good practice whenever you're migrating to a newer version of .NET, always update your NuGet packages too, so that you don't have to deal with that again. I'm using a package here which is not Microsoft or system.NET package, so I'm not going to change this to 5, but other packages are Microsoft, so I can change that to 5. Even if you're using Microsoft, make sure that the version is there on NuGet, otherwise it will throw error. I have already made sure these packages do have 5 version, and that's the reason why I'm changing them to 5 here. So all the packages are changed to 5. Now I'm gonna go to my shared project, and here also we'll change the target framework to 5.0. And now our application is targeting to .NET 5. Now let's open our terminal, and I'm going to stop running this application. And here I'm going to say .NET build and hope that it doesn't go any errors. It's going to restore our projects and rebuild our application, and it will use .NET Framework 5 for building our application. And you can see that now build is succeeded. And now I'm going to say .NET run to run my application, and this will run my application on localhost 5001, which I'm already running here. So I'm going to refresh my application here. And now if I click on login, it works like it did before. So this is how you can migrate your application from .NET Core 3.1 to 5. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comment section. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me on Twitter or Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.